Hey guys, Tacaro speaking. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about a little game called Warp to Sector 1, which recently came out in early access on Steam. The game is, I believe, being developed by primarily a single person, and they're planning to have it hit 1.0 later this year. We'll see if they hit that. The game is pretty feature complete, I'd say, but there's some content expansions that they'd like to do, and I think there's a decent amount of rough edges for them to iron out before it hits 1.0. So, but that is their plan. The game's tagline is Trade, Conquer, and Explore, which I think is pretty apt. Those are the three main activities that you can get up to in this game. And what the game is a space sandbox that has been abstracted a good bit, and in which you look and navigate a big sector map, which kind of looks like a bunch of nodes that are connected by warp lines, potentially one might say. I'm not entirely sure whether that's accurate with the lore, but, that's basically what it looks like. And the game currently features three modes, sort of, if you want to call them such. You have the Pirate Warlord and Advanced Systems tutorials, which are like mini campaigns, so to speak, that will give you some end goals to achieve and will walk you through some of the basics of the game. The Pirate Warlord tutorial, which is the one I'd recommend starting with, goes through the basics of moving around the map and exploration, basic scanning of sectors and connected sectors, trading, and combat. The Advanced Systems tutorial covers deep scanning, which is essentially a tool for you to explore within the node that you're currently in further in an attempt to find either lore entries or salvageable stuff that might be worth some money, and that sort of thing. It also teaches you about anomalies, which are kind of unique events that you can run into that have some stat checks involved. It's kind of interesting, very kind of old school JRPG, not JRPG, just, well, actually Western RPG more so, D&D inspired type stuff. But those are pretty interesting. It also introduces you to the basics of the faction system, although there's a lot more to it than what the Advanced Systems tutorial shows you, as well as colonization, same deal there. Gives you a basic idea of how it works, but there's a lot more to it. And tells you about the codex, which logs all your lore entries and also is where you can go to find further information about the various game systems. Unfortunately, it's not quite as thorough as maybe I would hope, but that is something that maybe the dev can expand upon as things progress. Last but not least, obviously, we have the main game mode, which is called Open Galaxy, and it is a large sandbox consisting of 2,000 sectors, which again kind of map to nodes. And your goal there is going to be based off of what career you choose to start your run with. Before you get to that choice, you can name your commander and your vessel. I'm just going to go through with the automatic stuff here. There's a little lore dump. I won't get into the lore. I think it's pretty interesting and fairly well written, but it's something that you can mostly ignore if you're doing a run that's not involving exploration. So if you choose Explorer, you're probably going to be needing to read a lot of lore or click through it. But the other paths, I'm pretty sure you can kind of just ignore that. But the dev is hoping to have 5 different careers in the game once it hits 1.0. Currently, there's only 2 implemented. I'm not going to go over the 3 that have not been implemented yet because there is some stuff you can sit there and read through, but I think it's kind of work in progress. But those 3 that are, TBD are Trader, Diplomat, and Settler. The 2 that are implemented are Warrior and Explorer. Of the 2, I've mostly played the Explorer start. And again, actually, I shouldn't say start. This is not something you can change once you pick. But it is something where I guess it would give you a good reason to do multiple playthroughs with different objectives and bonuses, because that is what these options give you. They changed the victory condition for the warrior start. It's 500, destroy 500 pirate vessels and clear all pirate strongholds. And you get the bonus of a special command you can use, which it says musters fleet. I'm not entirely sure how that works. Again, this is something where I wish the game was a little bit more explicit with what some of these things do. I think some of the abstraction and, smoke and mirrors here is by design so that you can kind of play and figure stuff out as you go, and there's some charm to that. But I think for some of these basic commands that you may have access to or systems, I think if it was a little bit more complete in its explanations of those, that would be helpful. With the start, you also get 5% additional pirate loot, and there's a raid chance increased when you're using the rally command. Don't know exactly how that works, but again, I think kind of just have to play and find out. Currently, the Explorer Start, on the other hand, has a victory condition that requires you to explore 95% of all the sectors, so all the nodes on the map, and find all discoveries, which again, you get by doing deep scans in various nodes. The bonus that you get is the survey command, which reveals information. Normally, your scan only reveals information about nodes one warp away from where you're at. Survey goes out to kind of 2 nodes. So that'll help you kind of navigate the map a little bit more safely, or at least to pinpoint points of interest that you want to explore. You also get an increase to your max fuel, 20% increase. It's pretty good. And when you use survey, it draws nearby patrols to you. So I'm just going to click that here. We're going to start an explore run. And I'm just going to walk you guys through the basics of the game real quick. All right, one thing I should note is that I do believe that it procedurally generates the map every time you start a new run. So that's kind of neat. It's never going to be exactly the same. All the sectors are numbered, which is useful both for identifying them on the map here, and also as you explore, you will log in this map tab here information about important sectors that you have explored, because some of these, we don't have any information right now, but they may contain stations where you can trade, refueling depots, pirates, asteroid fields, that sort of thing, all sorts of different stuff. But yeah, to start out with, this is really the screen that you're going to be spending the most time in, and it's the way that you're going to be interacting with the game primarily. Taking up the majority of it here is the sector map, which is used both for looking around and plotting out routes, as well as navigating and interacting with the sectors that you are in. Let's see, on the side here then, we have the ship status UI element, and this defaults to the ship tab. There's a bunch of different tabs. They're all pretty useful, but you kind of have to dig through them and figure out which ones you care the most about. But the ship tab gives you some general information about your ship and the current node you're in, as well as your credit balance and some high-level stuff about your run, including turn count and how long until the next epoch. Epochs, I think, are kind of map-wide events that change the game. They may be, I don't know, pirate raids. I don't know exactly what they all might be. There are some examples given, but pirate raids or something that affects trade. It's kind of random what you'll get. So that's kind of a fun thing to have to deal with. Also got your name up here. But moving on from that, you've got the map, which again, as you explore, it will add... Oh, okay, never mind. We're switching over to combat. Let's talk about combat. So typically, there's a timer. I've disabled it. It's pretty generous, though. And the way combat works, you can switch between different targets if there are multiple enemies to attack. But you'll get some information about your target over here. On the left-hand side is your information. Sorry, right-hand side, for those not watching my little cursor go around, is the enemy information. Left-hand side is your ship's info. Hull, heat, fighters, which we don't have any of right now, and subsystem HP. Heat is built up as you shoot, and different options you take in combat will either increase the amount of heat you're generating or decrease it, vent it, for instance. On the right-hand side, we don't have any sort of heat readout for enemies, but they have base HP and then just kind of a generalized setup of information about their subsystems as well, because we can target them. On the bottom left-hand side, we've got the combat log, which gives you information about what's happening during combat, which can be useful because sometimes there's a lot of stuff that happens on any given turn. At the top of the screen here, there's information about what our enemy plans to do, And this is not always accurate, or sometimes it's kind of, you just get a bunch of question marks, so you have to guess. But this will give you kind of an inclination as to how you should set up your turn. So right now, they are using thruster pattern shift, which guess means that we will miss, more likely to miss, essentially. So there's 4 different levers that you can tweak when you're playing here in combat. You've got a stance you can select. You've got fighter options, utility options, and heat management options. Stance affects both the damage you deal and the damage you take. Aggressive stance will obviously make you do more damage, but take damage. Conversely, defensive or evasive will reduce the damage that you take, but also decrease the damage that you deal. Some of these options enable additional utility options. So for instance, the repair utility option can only be used by default if you are using the defensive stance that turn. Also, let's see here. Evasion will also allow you to flee if you use the evasion stance or attempt to flee. Since this guy is making it so it's going to be harder for us to shoot, I'm just going to choose balanced for now. On the fighter side of things, again, we don't have them, but I'll go over this. You have hold, which will make the fighters do nothing. You have attack, which will make them do a decent amount of damage, and they do quite a bit of damage. However, every time you use one of these non-hold options, you will lose some fighters. So that's the downside. They're kind of a finite resource that you can replenish at star bases, but, again, just something you have to be aware of. Screen is an option that will use your fighters to defend your ship from incoming fighters / damage. And bomb will do more damage than the attack command, but will sacrifice more fighters. On the utility side, you can do nothing. I'm not sure this is ever actually a good idea. It seems like it's always a good idea to choose something. The repair utility option you can use when you're in defensive stance, and that will repair a small amount of your hull, but it can only be used 3 times per combat. You have target weapon, which will make your damage, in addition to damaging the hull, hit the enemy's weapon systems. Engine will do the same thing except targeting their engines. Systems, I'm not entirely sure. I guess maybe for more complicated enemies, they might have another systems subsystem that would target. And then overload, which can be used twice per combat, which increases your damage by 50%, but also increases the amount of heat you generate with your attack. So we'll target their weapons for this turn because there's a chance we miss. I don't want to overload our weapons. And then on the heat management side of things, you can use standard, which will mean that you shoot and it generates an average amount of heat. You can use sustained, which increases your damage, but also increases heat generated. Or you can use the vent option, which will basically make you skip your attack, but you will vent a bunch of heat. As getting to max heat, I believe, damages your ship and also may stop you from attacking the following turn if you hit max. Besides that, the only other thing I feel like I should probably mention here is the momentum bar here. And as combat progresses, depending on how things are going, this line will move either up or down the track. As it moves up, you will get some boons and potentially access to additional options, and as it goes down, it may lock out options. Events pop up that, let's say, like I'm doing really poorly, an event might pop up that forces me to either use an aggressive stance or a defensive stance for the rest of combat. So that's kind of rough. I'm not entirely sure what the events are when you get further up the track. I usually am not doing well enough in combat for it to get there, and combat seems, at least at lower levels, to end very quickly. So you're not as likely to see that. So let's just run our turn and we'll see what happens. We did 4 damage to them. They did not do anything to us. However, this turn they're going to be sending jammer drones, which means we're going to take minus 15 system HP. I think we want to just try to kill them this turn, so we're going to use aggressive, overload, and sustained, which does 16 damage, and it does kill them before they can take their turn. So there we go. So you get some credits for beating pirates, and that is how that works. Now, okay, back to what I was originally going to show you guys. Sector mapping. So we've gone that way. This is a one-way warp, so we couldn't go back that way. I'm not entirely sure which way to go here, so now's a good time to show you guys. If you right click, or you can click down here or type it out. So you also have a little terminal down here that you can type stuff out in. But I'm going to use the scan command, which is now pinged all connecting nodes. And you can see down here in this nav readout in the comm log, which again is kind of like a turn log, like the turn log that we saw in combat, but for general exploration. And this will give you an idea of what's in adjacent sectors. It is not always 100% accurate, so you kind of have to take this with a grain of salt. We'll go towards 6 because it sounds like there might be another pirate in 9. Actually, I misread that. Oh, why did we get 10? Why did it say 10? That's kind of interesting. Not sure about that. So we're going to scan again. Major installation, 72% confirmed at 5. So let's go there. All right, so we have found a trading port. So if I enter the trading port now, you can see this gives us a cool little diagram of what it looks like. I think the devs said they might be trying to switch these out. I personally find the art in this game really cool, but you can buy organics or sell equipment at this one. These are the 3 main commodities in the game, and essentially every station will be trading in these. They will always either buy or sell each of them, and you can tell which they do by their classification. So SSB means sells ore, sells organics, and buys equipment. So in this case, I don't have anything yet, but I could fill my my cargo hold with ore. Might not be a bad idea. Although it's a core world, so there's some options. There's some kind of additional things down here to note. There can sometimes be temporary events, but there's also permanent kind of adjustments to each individual station. So this one's a core world, and ore sells high, equipment is cheap though. And it's a faction. It's in our current faction, so prices are affected depending on our standing with different factions. I think we start at max affinity with this main faction that we're in. But anyways, we'll buy some more and we will exit. But as you can see now, even if we leave this sector in the map tab, we now have noted down this trading port, and also the last prices that we saw there. These will not update unless we go back to the port and enter it. But it'll also tell us what they buy and sell, so that can be useful for planning out routes. You can also click here to have the map center on these various nodes that you've discovered, and that's useful. Following on from that, we have the ledger, which will keep track of all of your income and expenses. So this is pretty useful. It'll also tell you how much you bought per unit, well, the price per unit when you buy or sell, which can be very helpful because as you kind of run a certain trade route, usually your profits will decline as you kind of change the balance of goods. So that's a useful thing to have there. In the next tab, we have your fleet readout. As you level up, you can hire additional captains to work in your fleet. They can be used both for combat and for defending and patrolling areas, as well as to trade. I'm not entirely sure how good they are at trading. Whenever I've asked them to trade, they always say they're going to try to get 5,000 credits, and then they leave for a very long time before actually getting any money. So I'm not entirely sure how useful that is, but theoretically, they could be useful for trading, and they're definitely very helpful in combat because they will assist you in combat encounters. Although they don't really take commands, they just do whatever they want. Still useful to have additional bodies, so that's what that does, and this lets you keep track of them, as well as once you do have them, you can type out order and then a number. Ooh, that's not how you spell order. Order and then number, so it would be like the first person in my fleet, and you can tell them to trade, or you can tell them to, follow, I think is another command. I forget all the different commands, but there's a number of different commands, and you can use the terminal there to give orders to them even when you're not within the same sector. Then we have the lore tab. This tracks all of your lore entries that you found, and also gives you a way to access the codex, which gives you kind of a larger, more verbose way of looking at the lore, as well as a guide here and a list of anomalies. I guess we'll see. I don't know why this isn't available in early access, but that's not implemented. But I assume it'll be a list of all the anomalies that you've encountered. So this would be a good time for me to talk about deep scanning. So deep scan, if we right click here, you can do deep scan. You can choose a variety of different ways to deep scan, some that are a higher chance of success, but take more turns. And others will be shorter turn requirements, but less chance of success. I'm not entirely sure why you would usually want to use the lower turn options. I guess you might be on a quest that has a turn limit and you don't want to waste turns, but typically I would go for the 4-turn option. So I use that. We successfully found something. In this case, it was just some salvage, a damaged escape pod, but it was worth some credits, so that's cool. You can really only deep scan once in each of these sectors. So as far as I know, I guess it says it's a cooldown, so maybe after a while it might repopulate with stuff you can find. But that's how deep scanning works. Useful if you're trying to do a non-combat, non-trade focused run. Then back to the ship status tab, we have the stats tab, which gives you a lot of run stats for your current run. It also, I think this is tracking how many of the requirements you've completed to get up to the next rank, which will increase your fleet capacity. And then at the end here, we have the tracking tab, which tracks any current objectives you have. Objectives you get by taking on requests from the various factions. And to do that, I'm going to quickly dock at the starbase here, which will also give us a bunch of other stuff to talk about. So at the starbase, you can repair your ship, refuel. You can buy fighters if you have a fighter hold in your current ship. You can load and unload colonists, and these are needed to start colonies on planets that you may find. The colonies themselves typically generate one of the 3 main resources, but they can also be upgraded to do some other stuff as well. So there's kind of an interesting thing going on with the colony system. I think that's one of the main things I'm going to call out in this game. It seems relatively simplistic on the surface, but each of the different mechanics seems to have a lot of depth. Again, I hope that increases as early access continues and that it becomes a little bit easier to figure out exactly how things work once you dig into each system, because right now the guide does not really cover all of those. But yeah, it's pretty neat. You also have the ability to upgrade your ship. Each ship has a different number of module slots that you can equip utility modules into, and they will have different types. So the starter ship here has 1 weapon module and 2 utility modules, but utility modules come in weapons, defense, and utility categories. The weapons and defense ones are rather limited in terms of, what you got there. But the utility ones, there are quite a few options, and they do a lot of different things. Plenty of them boil down to just making you more efficient at exploring or at combat, but some of them will also give you the ability to make bookmarks and create trade routes and that sort of thing. So they're pretty cool. You can also go to the shipyard here, and this will allow you to trade in your current ship if you have the credits to purchase a new ship, hopefully a better ship. All of these ships will have different things they specialize in. Typically, it's going to be either more trading focused or combat focused, but that can be a good way to kind of increase your standing and give you a better chance of surviving out there. They also all have different combat stats, and you can see that here, as well as maximum fuel, and they have specific bonuses as well. So that's kind of neat. Then beyond that, I'm going to skip over the guild hall real quick because that's going to be the last thing we'll cover here, and it's a bit more in depth. But we have options to save and load our game, and undock, which returns us to the map. But now let's talk about the guild hall real quick. There's a lot going on here, but we're going to start at the bottom with guild management. This will give you an overview of your colonies, your fleet, and your fighters. At the bottom left here, it also gives you a list of achievements, essentially, that you need to complete to get to the next rank. And as you achieve these, that will increase the maximum roster size of your fleet. I'm not sure if it has any other benefits at this time, but yeah, I know for a fact that it increases how many captains you can have on your roster. It also gives you an idea of what your fleet salary is down here once you start hiring captains, because you do have to pay them. So we'll go back for now. Then there's the deposit credits tab. This is not implemented yet. I don't know exactly how that will work. I wonder if you will get some income from that. Not sure. It could just be a way to protect your credits from being lost when you lose your ship, but that's not here yet. The bounty board, though, is implemented, and this is rather interesting. We have listed on the left here all the different factions, and each of them will give you a bunch of different tasks that you can take on. Most will come in kind of one of three flavors. They'll either be combat focused, whether that's eliminating a specific enemy or a certain number of enemies in their territory. They may be trading focused, so like a cargo run where we need to deliver X amount of materials to any port in that faction's territory, or they could just be a patrol duty option, which asks us to explore X number of nodes within any given faction's territory. So that's how that works. Taking them on will reward you with both credits and standing. When you turn in the task, you can choose between more credits and less standing, or more standing and less credits. The other interesting thing here, it kind of depends. Some of these will always be timed, but let's say this patrol task here, if I click on that, you can choose whether to negotiate standard terms, rush terms, or hazard terms. If you do standard, there will be no deadline, but if you do rush or hazard, you'll have to complete the objective within a certain number of turns, which will increase the amount of reward you get, but also, I believe, cause you to take a larger faction standing hit should you fail the task. So that is how the task / bounty board works. You'll also here have the faction embassy, which gives you information about your standing with each of the different factions, as well as some information about the factions themselves. They all have specific abilities that I believe you unlock once you hit a certain amount of standing with any given faction. And you can also, once you hit certain breakpoints, kind of go down this treaty track, and this will give you some boons, such as you get better port prices. So I think it affects both buy and sell prices for ports in their territory, that sort of thing. Safe passage, intel sharing, and full alliance. So you definitely stand to gain by working with them. The only problem here is you have this web section, which will show you that there are friends and foes when it comes to the factions. Each of them will be allied and have rivalries with certain other factions. So I don't think it's going to be possible to be friendly with all of them at once. But pretty interesting system. Haven't gotten far enough into the game to really see the rippling impacts of that. I think the factions do end up at war with each other and that sort of thing. But it's a big system. I'm not entirely sure how that plays out. There is a news article that comes out at a certain amount of turns periodically that will give you some updates on things happening in the galaxy, and it will usually talk about stuff that's going on between the different factions. But I haven't seen a whole lot of that play out in person yet. So I'm not sure if that's implemented and I just haven't seen it, or if that's something that's kind of in progress, a work in progress. And last but not least, we have the Hire Captains tab here, and this is where we hire on captains for our fleet. The stronger the captain is, the more expensive they are going to be to hire, and I believe they will also typically ask for a higher salary, so just be aware of that. I will hire this guy, Dax Morin, for 25,000 credits. He's in a light, small ship. And then we're just going to leave here, and I'm going to show you guys really quick how you can interact with your buddy here. So we're going to hail the ship that's in our sector. One important thing, if you run into NPC ships, you can hail them like I just did there, and you can ask them for information, which will be tracked, I believe, in maybe it's intel. So map intel tab. This will give you kind of hints. They might say, oh, there's pirates in sector 56. And those will only last for a certain amount of time, but that can be useful. So always worth hailing friendly ships when you run into them. But talking to our own fleet captain here, we can ask him for a status report, which will tell us what he is doing and how healthy he is. But we can also give him new orders. So these are the different orders you can currently give your fleet commanders. You can tell them to guard the current sector they're in. You can tell them to patrol the area. You can ask them to begin a trading run, and they'll just kind of go do their own thing and try to make some credits. Or you can ask them to report to yourself, which will mean that they follow you around and assist you in combat. So those are the various options. We'll send him on a trading run right now. He says he'll return with 5,000 credits. We'll see how he does. It might be a while. But yeah, I think that covers all of the basic systems. The only other thing I will say is if you found how the game looks to be a little off-putting, there's the CRT option down here, and you can do all sorts of stuff. Oh yeah, you can do different colors, you can do heavier effects, less effects. Really like this feature. You can also turn this off. This is what it looks like with pretty much everything off. But I prefer the subtle preset that the game kind of uses by default. But with all that, I think that covers the basics of the game and how it works. I'm personally enjoying it quite a bit, and I'm excited to see how it progresses as it nears 1.0. I hope that the dev continues to, again, iron out those rough edges. But I'm personally very much intrigued by where this is going, and if you are as well, I will put a link to the game down in the description of this video. If you liked what I'm doing here, I'm trying to give people a more objective, kind of facts-focused look at games, probably primarily indie games. But if you like what I've done here, please feel free to like and subscribe. I will be trying to put out more videos like this. And if you guys let me know that you're enjoying it, that would give me quite a bit more motivation to continue. So yeah, very much appreciated. Hope you all have a great day, and thank you for watching. Goodbye.